Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Maximus Scottimus Dalius, father to a not murdered son, husband to a not murdered wife, and I shall have my podcast in this world or the next.
And I'm Caesar. Everyone love me.
No.
Aw.
This week, our series, Deconstructing the Films of Ridley Scott, continues with the 11th film made by the director and his biggest yet. That's right, everyone. We're finally talking about the year 2000's Gladiator, a movie you probably not heard of at all.
Yeah, it's a small movie. Hasn't had much of an impact on the greater world of cinema for the last 25 years or so.
Definitely not. So we're going to be talking all about Gladiator. We'll be reviewing it in depth, including what it means for Ridley Scott's career, what it did for him, why he made it, all these fun things we like to do when we do these Deconstructing director series. And then we're going to switch gears a little bit, Matt, and we're going to talk about one of my newest, favoritist, most wonderful TV experiences I've had this year, which is the new HBO Max show called The Rehearsal. I've watched the first episode of the show, and I want to talk to you about it because I think it is just delightful and worthy of talking about, I think.
All right, that's fun.
But I think most of our conversation is going to be about Ridley Scott's Gladiator because one of us really, really, really likes this movie.
Yeah, that's true,
Yeah.
Scott.
So let's get into Gladiator.
Tell me your name.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this life or the next.
Win the crowd, and you'll win your freedom.
Are you not entertained?
Matt, what is this movie all about?
A former Roman general sets out to exact vengeance against the corrupt emperor who murdered his family and sent him into slavery.
This movie was written by John Logan, William Nicholson, and David Franzoni. It was, of course, directed by Ridley Scott and stars Russell Crowe, Joaquin Phoenix, and Connie Nelson, along with another, a cast of wonderful character actors behind all these guys. Great cast of this movie. Matt, the thing that I normally do at the start of this is ask you what this rewatch was like for you. It feels weird to do that, because and probably most of our listeners, or I know and probably most of our listeners know that this movie is hugely important to you, one of your favorite movies of all time, and so I think the place to start with this is ask you, instead of what you thought about it on this rewatch, is kind of what was on your mind going into this rewatch. What were you thinking? What were you hoping for? What were you expecting revisiting one of your favorite movies ever with the idea of examining it and analyzing it in mind?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think I can say that whatever I had in mind going into it, I still actually was quite surprised by what I found, because it was not really quite exactly the movie that I remembered, which is the thing that happens to me when I go back and revisit a movie that I haven't seen in a long time. And another weird thing about that is I've clearly seen this movie way too many times because I have it totally memorized, like shot to shot memorized, that kind of favorite movie status. And yet it still kind of lands different with me now. I think for lots of reasons, it's entirely possible that the last time I saw this movie, I wasn't even a father. I'm not sure if that's true, honestly, but it kind of feels like it might be true because a lot of the stuff with like Maximus's motivation landed very differently. And another thing that surprised me is like how it sort of exceeded my expectations in certain ways, particularly visually. Like as a visual spectacle, it's still amazing. And that's one thing I guess one of the things on my little notepad of things to talk about is like this movie really did shape how people did movies. I mean, since that date and today.
Yeah.
Like the especially the way people do like epics, large scale stories. I think that Russell Crowe's like acting actually sort of shaped the perception of what good acting looked like for a period of time, because he has this very sort of internalized, understated performance, this very stoic persona. And yeah, I'm kind of, I know I'm all over the place, man, because I'm going to be all over the place when it comes to one of my favorite things. How was your viewing of Gladiator this time, Scott?
Yeah, so I mean, I think I kind of went into this movie on my mind knowing that Ridley Scott makes three kinds of movies, really, and we're overgeneralizing, but like I think overgeneralizing is the name of the Deconstructing director series game, so I'm fine with it. He makes science fiction movies, he makes small personal dramas, and he makes big sweeping historical epics, right? And I think going in, my expectation was this one is the masterpiece in that big sweeping historical epic column. And of course, we have many more movies to watch still, but I can't see that being untrue at any point throughout the rest of this project. Like he's made a lot more of these big historical movies. It's got to be the best one. It just has to be, because it is really remarkable how good this movie is on so many different levels. You know, like we've been talking for the last few weeks about how disappointing a lot of these Ridley Scott movies have been, especially on the script level. And it's a weird place to be in, because Ridley Scott is not a writer. He's a director. He hasn't had a writing credit on any of these movies, I think. That might not be true. I think Legend, maybe he has a writing credit on. But for the most part, he directs. He's not a writer-director. He's a director. And we've been struggling with these movies that we think are beautiful, but just don't have the story or the characters. It's just not there. And this feels like the movie that Ridley Scott has been waiting for, you know, the entirety of the 90s. Like this is the movie he's been wanting to make. I think it is remarkable how all the disparate pieces of filmmaking come together to make something I genuinely think is truly special. I think this is a fantastic movie. I had so much fun revisiting it. It's 2.5 hours long. It's a very long movie, and I just never felt that. It felt great and fun and heartbreaking and everything it wanted you to feel throughout all of it. What a movie. What a movie.
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think maybe if I'm allowed to have criticisms at this point, some things that landed differently with me did have to do with the pacing, where there were certain things toward the end where I was like, why did we do it this way? Like this seems extraneous. And then I thought about it and I was like, well, Matt, I don't think I'm entirely wrong, but I also on a different level want to say that I think I have, when I saw this, when this movie came out, I was like, what, like 19 or something? Or, no, I can't have been 19. That doesn't make any
14,
sense. I was 14 or 15. Yeah, 14. And what's funny is I'd never really understood the movie until now, which is pretty embarrassing. But I mean it in a specific way. So like when I was a kid, I was able to kind of hand wave away questions like, well, why doesn't Commodus just kill him? And then I watched the movie this time and I was like, oh, I'm just an idiot. Like the movie is very clear about Commodus. And in fact, Commodus is just as much of a central character to the movie as Maximus is. I think when I was younger, I would get bored with the Commodus scenes and I would like fast forward them or maybe just not pay attention during the Commodus scenes because it's boring and slow and it's just talking. And now I'm like, okay, first of all, Joaquin Phoenix is great. And he's really fun in this. He's very hateable. And then on top of that, the movie's extremely clear on the dramatic level that Commodus's whole thing is that he needs people to love him. And it's driven him insane that he feels like nobody loves him. And that is his particular problem. That is his issue as a character. And so it becomes important to him that he not just kill Maximus, but that he like beat Maximus, that people love him and not love Maximus. And the movie is very careful at the script level in terms of how it meters out, like, what is Commodus thinking right now? And why is he doing what he's doing? And it always perfectly makes sense because in his own mind, he's engaged in this game with Maximus where he's trying to win over the people and win over his sister and and win this game that he perceives himself as playing with Maximus. And maybe this has always been obvious to you, Scott, but this was like the first viewing where it really like connected with me. Like, oh, like it's this is a central thing that the movie is doing. A central thematic thing is the idea of Commodus and love and his relationship with his father, and Maximus's relationship with the emperor and all that. Like that's what the movie's actually about. And I just thought that was boring because I wanted to see people hack each other's heads off with swords. So that's kind of what I was getting at when I said a minute ago, like it landed very different for me.
Yeah.
Because go ahead.
So many things to talk about in that line of thought. I think the first thing that I'll say is I totally agree with you. And that's exactly what I was talking about on the script level, because there is this wonderful scene, maybe 2/3 of the way through the movie, where Maximus has his big moment, his big remove his helmet, reveal himself to the emperor moment, where he gives that wonderful line that still gives me chills, even though I've seen this movie many times, of father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance in this world or the next. Like, beautiful scene, wonderful scene. And it's one of those things where I think in a lesser movie, they go for that scene, but they don't bother to then, as you said, explain from that point on why he doesn't just immediately kill Maximus. They don't bother to put the legwork in to craft a situation in which Commodus can't do that. Like, he literally cannot do that. That would be the opposite of everything he wants out of this whole thing. And so he's stuck, and he's in this situation where he has to play this game. And you're absolutely right. The wonderful thing about the movie is he thinks he's winning the game the whole time, and all he's doing is losing. Like, every day that goes by, more and more people are going to Maximus's side, and he's totally confident. I love the scene where he tells his sister, like, oh, she says he'll be forgotten in 5 months or something. And he goes, much sooner. It's been arranged. And his like big arrangement is also tigers.
Yeah.
Like they just put tigers in the arena, and like, that's it. That was your big plan to defeat Maximus, is you're just going to, I mean, don't get me wrong. Tigers are big and scary and deadly, but like, you seem so confident that you have this whole thing handled, and there's no way this guy's going to get out of this alive. And it's not like you didn't do anything actually sneaky. You just put tigers in the circle and said, well, this will probably work. No, tigers. I don't know. I agree with that. I think the thing about Commodus to me is he's definitely the character you hate, right? Like, you despise him. You get so angry with him. This watch, I just felt bad for him. I really, and not like I have sympathy for him or anything, but just like, he's so sad and pathetic. And like the scene where he murders his father, I think hit me in a way that it's never hit me before, which is like, as much as we're building up his father, Marcus Aurelius, as like this perfect person, it's also very clearly that he wasn't. He was a shitty father. Yeah. And like the thing to say, like the line that he says to his son that finally gets Commodus to kill him is like, your failings as a human being are not your fault. They're my fault. And I'm like, great. Thanks, Dad. That's super comforting.
Right. I mean, I felt similarly to that is like Marcus Aurelius is like, what is my legacy? Like, having butchered the entirety of the European continent.
Yeah.
And Maximus like defends him. And what's funny is 14-year-old Nat was probably like, yeah, don't be so hard on yourself. You got all these awesome battles. And now I'm like, yeah, you were, a monster. You're a horrible person. Like, why did, like, this was, okay, I guess you have regrets as an old man. That's nice, I guess. Yeah, that's better than nothing, I guess. But yeah, like, clearly he was this extremely flawed character. And I wanted to reference the murder scene that you just mentioned, because I love, I think in some places the script is almost too on the nose, but I think maybe it needs to be, since 14-year-old Nat didn't understand any of this anyway. Maybe I can't say it was too on the nose, because he gives the speech where he says, you gave me a list of virtues, and he lists off all these virtues and says, I had none of these virtues, but I have other virtues. And then the whole rest of the movie is basically demonstrating Maximus has the virtues that Marcus Aurelius was searching for, the sort of the heroic virtues. Commodus sort of has the Slytherin virtues, you could say. and the result is Maximus just wins over and over again, in this contest of wills with Commodus, because like these are the appealing heroic qualities of a leader, and Commodus doesn't have these qualities, and Maximus does, and like that's
Yeah.
I thought that was like I never got before the function that little speech of his was actually serving in the movie.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. But I think one of the interesting things that I've never really inspected, and I kind of one of the places I want this conversation to go, is the idea of the fickleness of the populace, the fickleness of the crowd, right? Maximus is this guy that is able to win over the crowd. He's able to get people behind him. He's able to get people to follow him and be loyal to him. But one of the things that I think this movie is also saying is, but most of those people are like really dumb and like just are going to change their mind at the drop of a hat. The part that like really stood out to me this time was when he fights the guy with the tigers and wins, and he does the decides to spare him against the order of the emperor.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's like screaming, kill him, kill him, kill him. And then he tosses the sword aside, and then like one person goes, "Oh, Maximus the Merciful." And then everyone's just like, "Yeah, you did the opposite of what we said, so now we love you for it." And it's like, it's just so fickle and meaningless. And I wonder how much of the movie like is commenting on that, because like the senators in this movie are kind of slimy across the board. Like even the ones that are on Maximus's side are like all playing a game and talk about, the people as if they're just morons and idiot and cattle that need to be manipulated into believing the correct thing. And like, I think the movie kind of in some ways shows that they're right. I fully believe, I guess, that if Commodus had like killed Maximus and survived that fight, that they would just be like, "Oh yeah, we like him now again."
Yeah, probably. I think you're probably right. I think the movie's ethos is not perfectly clear on that regard. I think one thing that I could say, maybe in answer to what you just said, is Marcus Aurelius has the speech about, there was a dream that was Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, that is very much left vague, because it's like, well, what was that dream? Like, what are you actually talking about? Are you talking about
freedom?
Are we talking like, I think it's funny, because I think this could just be me, but like, I think it's almost this gesture at like the Western world and modernity and the Enlightenment and modern values, and like not butchering people in arenas, and instead having democratic Republican countries where you have government by the people for the people, and the movie sprinkles in some language along these lines as well, and so you have and it's more than just sprinkled in. I mean, there's a clear demarcation where Commodus is trying to do away with the Senate entirely and just make it an empire, just make himself the autarch. And then and so Maximus comes to represent basically America.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so when we're saying like, well, the people are just dumb idiots, it's like, well, the people are gonna be dumb idiots if they are distracted with bread and circuses, but they also have the potential to be more than that if you give them the opportunity. I think this is all kind of there in the movie, but it's not entirely clear, and I don't know what you would do to make it clear, so I'm kind of okay with it being this way.
I guess the one complaint, quote unquote, I do have about the movie, and this is one of those things where like you criticize a movie for not having a thing that you would like it to have, which is in my opinion kind of dumb criticism, because like that's just, I didn't like it because it wasn't my idea of what it should be. But I mean, I would have liked, because I do think there's a lot of bits and pieces in this movie about, the people's kind of addiction to violence and show and story in this whole thing. You know, like the famous Maximus line of "Are you not entertained?" Right?
Mhm.
Is the movie, I think, kind of gesturing at critiquing this tendency of human beings to really get invested in people doing violence to each other. And obviously we don't kill each other in arenas anymore. We do hit each other really hard in arenas all the time for money.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I feel like the movie kind of gestured towards this thing where like we're making a commentary on our desire to see that kind of thing, and also, you know, through the action of the movie as well, because those fucking gladiator scenes are some of the most riveting sequences of the movie. They're really good. It's really
Mhm.
fun to watch those sequences, and it's like, isn't that a little weird, right? Like where you're simultaneously disgusted by the people in the audience cheering at murder while being like, fuck yeah, he fucking flipped that chariot and sliced that lady's neck open, and you're like, wait a minute. And I just don't think the movie is concerned with that particular thing. I don't want to say enough, because that's not what I mean. It's just it gestures towards that, but it doesn't really deal with that idea very much. And I guess I would have liked it to do that a little more.
Yeah, I think I feel you. I also fully think that this is yet another of the things that landed differently with me. And maybe I've gotten soft. I don't know. I don't know how to characterize it exactly. I definitely, you know, I used to hit people more regularly.
I think you need to put context in that.
In a martial arts context.
There you go.
And I don't anymore. And so maybe the idea of somebody getting bisected by a chariot wheel is just less awesome to me now. Like violence in film is always kind of interesting, right? Because there's a part of me that thinks it's awesome, and then there's also kind of simultaneously a part of me that's horrified by it, and that's always been true. And it's just like the size of the strength of those two parts of me has changed over time in different direct. Like when I was a little kid, I was probably maximally horrified by violence, and when I was exactly 14 years old, I was maximally fascinated by violence. And then I think as I've gotten older, I'm more like, oh, that poor woman. So so like, and that's nothing the movie's doing, right? That's like me as a person just reacting differently. And so I'm not really responding to what you said, other than maybe the idea is like, that kind of thing is always going to play differently with different people.
Sure.
And I don't know. Like, I think, I don't even think that you and I necessarily feel exactly the same about violence in movies. I think we both like action movies, but that doesn't necessarily mean we're perfectly on the same page. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I like action movies a lot, and I don't like. I really don't get bent out of shape about violence in movies. Like, I don't care enough about, like, I get bent out of shape about bad violence, and by that I mean just like uninterestingly shot or executed on, not like bad in the in a moral way. Like, I want movies to be interesting, and I think there's really interesting ways to shoot incredibly violent sequences, and I don't think you need to stray away from that for the sake of not being violent in a film. Stories are a place where you can do great violence and not have to worry about there being a real world effect to it. So please, by all means, do violence in films. I will say that, like, whenever you construct a movie in which people watching people do great violence to each other for sport, and you put that in your movie, there's a kind of an implicit, we have to comment on this in some way that's expected of me, you know, because you're kind of doing a story within a story type thing. And so I get, my complaint is not that you have to do that, but it just feels like when you construct this thing, and I think what the movie wants us to do, at least in the mid parts of it, is kind of be on Maximus's side with, like, this is disgusting. Like, that people do this, and like people love it, and like it's sport. Like, this is gross, and you're supposed to feel that way, but at the same time, you want Maximus to get his revenge. You're totally invested in that arc, and so you want him to kill as many people as he can to survive.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think, you know, I think maybe this is what I actually meant a second ago when I said, like, I felt worse about the violence this time around. It's like it's not that I can't handle violence in films anymore. It's that I was paying attention to other things in the movie and realizing that you're not supposed to be happy about this. Like the whole, I mean, okay, obviously, the intro battle has always been fascinating to me because, and I do mean always, because it first of all, it's, you know, it's an amazing sequence. It's like head and shoulders above anything that came before it. Like Braveheart was the only other thing, and Braveheart looks like a piece of trash compared to this movie.
Take that, Mel.
Take that, Mel. And like, it's a movie, like it ramps up this amazing music. One of my favorite songs ever, Gladiator Waltz is what it's called, because it's in 3/3 time. And just this bombastic, you know, get ready for the battle, we're gonna kill these guys, and obviously those guys suck because they cut off the head of the messenger, and you just don't do that. That's just not civilized. It's just not civilized to cut off the head of the messenger. And then you realize, or at least you realize when you're in your late 30s and you've read books, you're like, oh, the Romans are just invading and murdering these people.
Yep.
And the messenger was probably saying, you're basically a vassal state of ours now, and if you don't like it, then we'll kill all of your grown men. And then the battle happens, and it's like really violent, which is you're sort of like into it, and then it switches into morose, sad music, crooning, wailing voice, and like the camera goes out of focus, and there's just like fire and stabbing and mud and screaming, and it's like it suddenly turns into like hell, right? It's horrible and sad, and it's the same scene, right? It's the same battle scene, and like the movie, and it has this really interesting kind of complex, almost ambiguous relationship with all that violence, where it'll switch from bombastic to like you're kind of tugging your collar, because you're like, you know, later on when they're in the gladiator fights, you're like, that was awesome, but like that guy was also just some poor unfortunate slave,
right? Yeah.
So this isn't like a victory. I don't know. Like then you get to really actually feel good when he kills Commodus, I guess. But funnily enough, like you said earlier, Commodus is so pathetic. That you. I'll admit it's pretty satisfying when he kills Commodus.
Well, okay, it is, but also I didn't remember how Commodus's death happens, which is not like, it's not badass. It's not cool the way he kills Commodus.
Yeah, it's
this slow, drawn out, painful. Like I felt like 2 minutes long of him slowly turning the knife into Commodus, and Joaquin Phoenix perfectly like trying to throw his shoulder at him like at the last moments to stop him. It's just really sad, actually. Like I and I don't want to seem like I'm sympathetic to Commodus. Like I want to make that very clear. Like he's a monster. He's an absolute monster. But he's a monster that I think you understand. You understand why he is this way. And like it's just so sad that like this is it. This is how you die. This pathetic way where you're just like limply throwing your shoulder against this man that's beaten you. You're like in perfect white with your nose having been broken and blood coming out of your nose, which perfectly like contrasts with the white you're wearing. It's just like it's not cool. I didn't feel like hell yeah. I just felt like I'm glad it's over, but fuck, man.
Yeah.
It's remarkable the way they film. Like, you wonder, like, how did that look in the script, right? Because that's the type of thing where you could make a decision in the filming that almost entirely changes the mood of the movie. And I found it really remarkable. And I think, by the way, I think you're spot on about like how you should feel about the Romans invading, Germanic tribes. I think there's a very apt line at the beginning where like I think someone like confidently says, "Shouldn't they know when they're conquered?" And I think Maximus's response to that is just, "Would you?" And I think that is very telling. Obviously, that Maximus is playing a Spaniard in the. He is not an OG Roman. He's from Spain, another area that was conquered by the Romans, and so just maybe hundreds of years ago, right? So like they've been fully indoctrinated into the Roman way of life, and this is just like it's not a good thing that they're doing, and I don't know. It is so weird because you're right that we're supposed to feel bad about what Rome is, but we're supposed to feel hopeful about what Rome will become, even though historically we know they're not just gonna like be a happy republic again. There's very little actual history in this particular movie, but I don't know. I'm so torn about this, and it's not. It doesn't hurt my enjoyment of the movie. It actually enhances it because it leaves me asking these questions. It leaves me asking questions about how I'm supposed to feel about the violence. How I'm supposed to feel, like generally, how am I supposed to feel about vengeance? Like Maximus was spurred on and killed dozens of people just for an opportunity to get to stand in front of Commodus and murder him, right? And I think one of the things that the movie does really well is we kind of see his desire for vengeance like transform into hope for Rome. And so like you feel a little bit better about it because he's not doing this just for entirely personal selfish reasons. He's trying to also save this place that he believes in. And that's good in that like it moves away from just selfish motivations. But yeah, I mean, I'm not like super into revenge as like a fuck yeah, let's get this is good for you type thing. So yeah, the movie makes me feel very, very, very conflicted.
Yeah, no, I think it's meant to make. I think that the movie's stance, having talked it out with you for a minute here, is actually just that violence is horrible and it's it's bad, and having to live in a world where that is the norm is awful and terrifying, and it kind of dehumanizes you. And when you grow up in that environment, you become the kind of person who can watch people butchering each other in an arena and cheer, and that's bad. Like that's a bad world. The past was terrible and dark, and it's good that we don't do that anymore. And now we just watch a movie about it and we feel kind of uncomfortable, right? So yeah, I think it's I think it like you just said, it's okay that the movie doesn't like clearly articulate its thesis here, because what it does is it leaves you with a mess of feelings and kind of says, hey, you figure it out. I did want to say, so as you were just talking, I looked up Gladiator script and I found what claims to be the Gladiator script, and I quickly found the end. And the part where Maximus defeats Commodus is like super badass and awesome. And Maximus is like, for my wife, for my son, and like as he strikes at Commodus with his sword, and then he doesn't die. And basically the whole end of the movie is totally different apparently. And yeah, like I feel like, especially knowing that, okay, assuming that's true, right? We're assuming this is a real script that Matt just randomly found on the internet.
Sure.
They definitely changed the movie to make it more like, this sucks. This is horribly sad and violent. Like Commodus is this guy who he only ever just wanted to be loved, and now he's staring with confusion and disbelief into Maximus's eyes as Maximus kills him, still not understanding why no one loves him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We all just want to be loved, right? That's you can hardly fault him,
It is amazing. And like, this is not me tooting my own horn, but I think this is a testament to the direction of the film. It's amazing that scene, you watch that scene, and one of the first things that came to my head was, I bet it wasn't this way in the script. and it seems like that's absolutely true, that like this is absolutely the kind of thing where maybe when you're sitting in a room by yourself writing it out, you build it to be that badass moment, and then as you're filming you realize that tone is completely wrong, that everything about this character is screaming we can't do it that way, that like that at the end of the day it's both the patheticness of Commodus and like Maximus. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. It doesn't feel like he's taking pleasure out of it either. I mean, part of that is he's dying. He's about to die. But it feels like he's gotten to the point now where this vengeance he's kind of committed this entire movie to is just a thing he has to do before he goes. And like, it's just his duty. And he doesn't want to do it. Like, I think there's actually a lot of comparison between that and how he fights at different points of the movie. Because there are moments where like, I think one of the interesting things about the early part is I think there are moments where he's fighting against the Germanic tribes that he has fully bought into the dream that is Rome and like the importance of what they're doing here. And so he fights like a man with purpose. And then there are moments where he's in the arena where he's fighting like a man who understands that this is necessary but doesn't want to do it. And I think the death of Commodus is closer to matching those moments than it is the moments from the beginning of the movie. And I think that adds to the complexity too, is like that you're absolutely right. The Commodus still hasn't figured it out at the end. And also Maximus has figured it out. Like he doesn't want to, this is perhaps still what's best for the country, but I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do this and then I'm going to be done. I'm going to be done with this whole thing. I'm going to go. And I think that's why it's so important that he dies at the end, right? That like he's not like all he wanted was to go back home with his family, right? Like he didn't want to lead Rome. He didn't want to fix Rome. He was just doing what was commanded of him and wanted to go home. And so that the movie gives him that moment where I love when God, what's her name? I forgot the character's name. Tells him, go home, go be with them. It's a beautiful moment. I love it.
Yeah. I just emphasize that. Like I think Russell Crowe does do a great job in this movie in terms of it is such a reserved performance, and yet you can still see over the course of really a few small moments where he kind of goes from being totally hopeless and just wanting to die to wanting just revenge in the most dark and straightforward way, to wanting maybe something a bit more than revenge, like justice or just to do what's honorable, to be honorable again, right? To be a man again in some sense.
I think he's a character who's been looking for meaning in his life, for a reason why he's done all the things he's had to do. He manages to find it at the end. Like it's, I mean, that's a great point, because when Marcus Aurelius is telling him like all this bloodshed has been pointless, Maximus actually gets super angry. Like some of the most animated he gets in the whole movie.
Exactly. Yeah. He's like, I won't believe that all of my men have fought and died for nothing. And, and he says they died for you and for Rome. Right. And it's like, well, what is, and that's literally what Marcus says is, what is Rome? And he's like, I don't know. It's just, it's not this horror. And then the rest of the movie is sort of showing him, well, actually this horror pervades Rome, because the gladiator fights are everywhere. And that's, that kind of becomes his crusade, is like ridding Rome of this rot that has infected it. And which is sort of personified by Commodus, because he's the guy who brings the games back to the Colosseum. So it's all super smart on that level. Really,
it is. This movie gets I think this is like, I want to kind of direct this towards the fact that this movie won Best Picture the year it came out, and I think this movie gets a bad rap. Like as I was preparing for this podcast, I was searching for images to get all the artwork stuff ready to go. And I found an article that was basically like, did Gladiator deserve to win Best Picture? Like looking 20 years later, looking back. And it's like, I don't understand why we do this, because it's a good movie that was received well by critics and fans. And like, we're going to try to relitigate whether, because I mean, it actually is a momentous moment in Oscars history, right? That this movie won. This is probably, and I'm saying this without remembering every single movie that's won since then, but this is probably the last like big blockbuster film that won Best Picture. Like, not saying a lot of the other movies weren't well liked, but this was a big movie. This made $500 million which in the year 2000 was not something to smirk at. Like it was very, very popular, and moving away from these type of movies winning Best Picture is a sign of the Oscars like transforming into something else. So I don't know, the idea of relitigating whether this movie deserves to win Best Picture, it's like, obviously it won, so yes, it deserves to win Best Picture because it won Best Picture. I don't know. I think it's a remarkably complex movie. You're right. That's the thing that surprised me. Like I went into this movie kind of going like, all right, so I'm going to see this guy and he gets revenge, but like, what's this about? And the fact that we had this conversation for 40 minutes, kind of trying to piece together what we feel about what the movie is trying to say about all these different things, I think is a testament to the complexity of what's going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we didn't even really get yet to talking about the visuals, which
Yeah.
you know, and by the way, I just briefly skimmed over the Best Picture winners since 2000, and you're correct. None of them have been the big, you know, universally loved by critics and audiences alike mega blockbusters. Anyway, yeah. So the movie looks incredibly good by any standards, but by the standards of the day, it was shocking, I think. But even by modern standards, when you can do all kinds of stuff with CGI, it has an artistic flair to it that I guess is kind of Ridley Scott's hallmark when he gets to shine. But you know, he takes the same kind of artistic sensibility that he approaches, you know, Alien and Blade Runner with, where it's just every frame is just a lovingly crafted, extremely carefully constructed piece of art, and brings that attention to the entire movie, and multiple different settings across wide swaths of Europe, and you know, from the lavish Roman palaces of Commodus to the you know, the Eastern territories where they're having the arena battles, to Germania, to Maximus's home in Spain, like all of the just like incredible atmosphere and just stunning, you know, I don't even have the words for it. It's just a beautiful movie.
I totally agree. I think one of the most interesting aesthetic choices to me was the moments where Maximus is unconscious, and we do this really interesting like above shot where he's like floating above the earth as he's moving along. We do it twice in the movie, right? It's right after he kind of collapses unconscious after seeing his home burned and is first taken into slavery, and then we do it at the very end as he's dying and moving on. And it's this really fascinating shot that really draws attention to itself. I've never seen anything quite like it, especially in a Ridley Scott movie, of this particular angle of shot. And it really draws attention to itself and makes it feel otherworldly. It makes it feel like a transition. Like the first time we get it, he's transitioning from his life as a general to his life as a slave, and at the end he's transitioning from this to something else, something beyond.
Yeah, that you reminded me of something I wanted to talk about specifically, which is the use of montage in the movie in general, because that's one instance of montage, is them taking him from wherever he collapsed, I guess that was in Spain, to wherever I don't actually know what
somewhere in
Yeah.
ancient Rome, yes.
Such and such territories of the empire. But then there's other montages to convey the passage of time, none of which even like announce themselves as montage. Like you're not even really aware that you're watching a montage, but what it is it's just, you know, clever filmmaking techniques to explain passing of time and character change and growth happening organically via, you know, I don't know, just a snatch of like Maximus cutting the tattoo off of his arm, things like this that are sort of thrown in, and there's something about like it's very stylistic. It's very stylistic the way, like in one of their gladiator fights, the camera does this wild thing where it spins around them after they win the fight, and like there's like light sort of god rays of light like cutting into the field of the camera view, and then it like and like the music is going crazy, and then it like fade over to like Rome, and that's like showing us like, now we're moving to Rome, right? And there's a lot of really interesting and clever work done with like transitions and like I said, showing the passage of time with clever film technique.
Yeah, I totally agree. One of the things that really stood out to me was how Ridley Scott shoots the Colosseum itself, which is this hugely impressive piece of architecture, right? Like it's this thing. I've been there. It's, you know, old, but still super impressive that like people built this thing. And he shoots it with this reverential awe, like the first time we see it. And then the way he shoots it from then on is I don't know, I felt like the camera felt very judgmental, which I think is very fitting of this thing. I feel like, when the camera like swoops up into the stands and sees the people in the stands cheering, like it's judging them. And so we take this incredibly impressive piece of architecture and like kind of expose it for the terror that it is. And the last time we see the Colosseum in the movie is when his friend has snuck in to kind of bury his bag with his kids' toys in it, right? The Juba character.
I thought they were his gods, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That. I mean, you're probably right. I don't know. They look like kids' toys, but I think it's to symbol his like faith in the gods again, right? That like that was something that kind of gotten beat out of him by his experience. But yeah, he buries them on the floor of the Colosseum. We kind of pull out, and it's this really interesting shot because the flowers from the fight are still there, which is another really fascinating choice that Ridley Scott did, where like as Commodus and Maximus are being raised up into the arena to fight, it's like raining flower petals. It's one of those things that reminded me of our conversation about the water dripping down an Alien, because you're like, where who did that? And like, how long did it take to, because like they're raining from the sky too, like the flower petals is there like someone up in the rafters just like sprinkling flower petals all over the place? How long did that take? It's kind of this completely impractical thing, but aesthetically creates this wonderful moment, this wonderful contrast where it's like, I think it exposes the whole thing for the lie it is, because there's beautiful flower petals blanketed this field of death. And then back to my point, the last time we see it, it's I don't know how much time removed from the moment of their fight, but the flowers are still there, but it's dark now, right? It's dark in the arena. And so I think were they pink? I'm not remembering correctly. I think they were pink, but the darkness makes them seem more red, and it kind of exposes it for the blood it is.
That's interesting. Yeah. This is not along the lines that you were going, but it's one thing I noticed this viewing that I never noticed before, was that after he finds his wife and son, it does like a crossfade cut with him lying on the ground. And what I realized on this viewing is that he's actually lying between two earthen mounds with flowers on top of them. So he has actually buried them. And
I did not know that.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that until this viewing.
Oh wow, yeah.
But I mentioned that here because the idea of like flowers on the kind of yellow dirt is the same basic image as where he is metaphorically buried. You have flowers on the dirt, and then so it's a ceremonial, it's a visual matching moment, I think.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I guess I want to talk to you about the performances a little bit. We've kind of briefly talked about them, but Russell Crowe won an Academy Award for this movie. He won Best Picture, or Best Actor.
Best Actor. Yeah.
And I think that's really remarkable, because I think you're totally right that this is a quiet, it's not a big performance. It's like he has really the one speech in the middle of it, and maybe that speech is what won him the Oscar, actually. But for the most part, he's very reserved. He's very quiet. He doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve, really. You have to really pay attention to the character and see the intricacies of what Russell Crowe is doing. And honestly, I went into this movie really ready to say to you, you know what, Mac? I like fat character actor Russell Crowe 100 times better than I like thin, in shape leading man Russell Crowe. And I still think that's true. I think the like Russell Crowe in The Other Guys is like one of my favorite performances of his. Mm-hmm. But I was really kind of blown away how good this performance was, because I was really expecting to be like, oh, Joaquin Phoenix like walks away with this thing. And Russell Crowe is like doing what the movie is requiring him to do, but not much more. And I still think Joaquin Phoenix like fucking rules in this movie, mm-hmm. but Russell, he is doing a lot. He is doing a lot. And it's very easy to chalk this up as just like the gruff, silent, manly man type and just write it off that way. But I totally understand why people voted for this for the Academy Award, because there's a lot going on underneath that. And Russell Crowe has to use his talents to express that and get us to understand the complexities that are boiling underneath this exterior of this man. And he does a great job. He does a great job.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments of the movie, totally seriously, is like the first 60 seconds where we see like 6 different emotions in Russell Crowe, none of which are overt at all. It's him standing sort of meditatively, almost praying, thinking about his family, looking pensive, and then he sees a bird and he kind of very lightly smiles as he watches the bird fly away, and then there's a sound fades in from the army, and we see his expression change to seriousness, right? And this is the kind of thing that we get from him constantly, where it's like very minor shadings that are nonetheless extremely effective. And and then when he has a moment where he actually is emoting strongly, it works really well.
Yeah. I have a question for you, semi-related to this, but about the opening. There's a moment in the opening that I'm not sure I understand, and maybe you can help me understand a little bit better. One of his lieutenants, I don't know, is looking at the catapults, and he says something to the effect of, move the catapults closer, right? They're too close, pull them back. I don't remember exactly what it is. But Russell Crowe's Maximus's response to that is, no, they're fine where they are. And he says, but sir, that will put our cavalry in the line of fire. And Russell Crowe was basically like, don't worry about that. They're fine. Which to me in the moment struck me as like, oh, that's kind of fucked up. He's just indifferent towards, and of course I think it's revealed later that like he is part of the cavalry. So like he's putting himself in harm's way as well. But I don't know. I did notice he is at times a little cavalier with the lives of the people that follow him. Like the moment where he's being broken out of Proximo's slavery, right? Where all his gladiator buddies come up to him and he's just like, I just need some time. So just buy me some time, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. And they're like, no, we do. And then they like all die. Like they all die horribly. And I'm like, oh, how do I feel about this? That, like, I don't know.
It's a major bummer, right? Because he gets their loyalty just because he's kind of, he has, I don't know, just in the language of the movie, he has these heroic virtues, so he earns their loyalty. And then they just all die for him, and it's sort of for no reason, because he gets caught like immediately anyway. And you're just it's a real bummer. One piece of trivia about that sequence, by the way, is Proximo was supposed to get like an awesome badass send off where he kills like 15 Praetorians, but the actor died in the middle of filming. So
I to be honest with you, I wondered that this time, because like you see him pull out his sword and his sword with Proximo on it, and you're like, oh, the way it's filmed is like we're gonna get an action sequence, and then it cuts from very clearly setting up he's gonna pick up the sword to use it, to them just coming down on him and stabbing him to death. So I understand that. I think I like it better this way, to be honest with you. I think again I want the movie to be more, this violence is sad and depressing than this violence is cool and empowering. And I don't want him to have this cool, badass, empowering death. I want it to be sad.
Right. I mean, Proximo is a fascinating character because he is also not cool. Like he used to be a gladiator, a slave, and the emperor was like, here's your freedom, you killed people so good and it was so fun to watch you kill people, you get to be free now. And Proximo said, thanks, I'm gonna go buy a bunch of dudes and get them to kill each other now, and that's gonna be my whole, and I'm gonna get really rich doing that. I'm gonna have a nice villa and a pet hyena, and it's gonna be awesome. I like this little tiny moment that really stuck out to me when they get back to Rome, and he like kisses the foot of the statue, and he says, bring me fortune. And you're like, bring you fortune? you have more fortune than anybody around you, and you're profiting off these slaves. What is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Never noticed. I mean, I noticed that moment, but it never struck me before about like, what the hell are you? You suck.
So yeah, that's a good question. And maybe is this a fault of the film that, like, I think the movie wants us to kind of have warm feelings toward Proximo at the end. I think, first of all, he's played by Oliver Reed, which is a very famous classic actor that you kind of just can't help but love. And Maximus, I think, grows to garner a great deal of respect for him as a human being. But you're absolutely right that he is a slaver who is profiteering from the deaths of people who have no choice in the matter. And so, yeah, is it the fault of the movie that we do feel that the moment of his death is like, aw, instead of, yeah, maybe it's good that you don't live in this new world, actually.
Yeah, maybe he knew that his time was over anyway, you could say. And it was time for him to kind of, I mean, the one thing you could say about him, like a scene where he dies heroically, could be like, well, at least now he's fighting for something other than his own selfish interests.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah.
But and the movie hyped him up as being like the greatest fighter ever, and then but I mean, it's weird. It's weird to say this because the truth is that he died tragically. But like I agree with you that him dying anticlimactically sort of works better with what I think the movie is trying to do, or at least in this reading of much older us.
Yeah, I mean, I love Maximus's final line to him is like, "Careful, you're gonna make me think you're a good person, and or a good man," and I'm just like, well, I mean, he was definitely like. Let's be clear here. He made a lot of money off of you murdering people, Maximus. Like a lot of money. And it's not like he let you go, right? It's literally Gracchus purchased you from him, and he probably didn't like cut him a deal. He probably like, yes, he ends up dying at the end, which like I guess like you can get a little redemption in the fact that he goes down for the cause, I guess, but like. He probably made bank off of selling Maximus to the senator, right?
I never thought about that. That's really, I think the problem was that Oliver Reed just played him as just too much of a gruff badass, and you like him despite the fact that
fucking Oliver Reed,
like the movie actually takes pains to show how despicable he is, like. It's horrible. Like it's objectively horrible. Like what he does and the way he lives his life and everything about his existence. He's just so charming. You can't hate him.
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's true. That's definitely very true. Who's not charming though? Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
I just want to, like, we've talked about Joaquin Phoenix a lot on the show. He's my favorite working actor right now. I think he's absolutely incredible. I think what they do in this movie really helps him. The way they make him up, the way they make him always kind of pale with circles under his eyes. He just looks fragile the entire time. He just looks completely fragile. He looks unhinged. Joaquin Phoenix is doing this thing where he it feels like he's constantly shaking. He's not, but it just feels like that every scene he's in. I think it's an incredible performance. Like everyone talks about the Busy Little Bees sequence, which is so good, right? The fact that this sniveling asshole can feel this threatening, because he absolutely is. But yeah, every other sequence he's in, man. Like, you're totally right that when I was younger, my favorite scenes were the battle sequences. At 37, my favorite scenes are anything with Joaquin Phoenix in it. He's doing such a good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think one funny thing is he becomes more impressive in this movie when you see like the rest of his career, because you realize that this is a different character for him. Like that's not what his voice sounds like, That's not the way he holds it. That's not Joaquin Phoenix's normal face. That's him really going pretty far into this weird guy, and really pulling it off. I think Signs is probably his most normal human character.
And he's a weird guy in that movie.
And even in that movie, he's kind of a weird guy, but like still Commodus is a pretty distinct character. So yeah, just agreeing with you that
I want to make sure we give due credit to Connie Nielsen as well, who plays Lucilla. She's in this movie with these two incredible actors, and I think she holds her own very well. One of the things that I don't think I ever, again, this is in my dumb younger watchings, I don't think I ever realized how distinct the two versions of her character are. Like the first time we meet her is when she's riding out to the front with Commodus, and she seems very indifferent to the things going on around her. She's laughing. She's she seems very typical, like noble, what you would expect a person of her status to be behaving like. She's surrounded by this death and these miserable men that are like barely clinging to life, and they show up and she's like, oh, and then after her father dies, the very distinct and dramatic change in her character, like it's like her whole world gets turned upside down to the point where she has to put all that aside, and she just is kind of just quiet and miserable the rest of the movie. I thought that was really remarkable, and I never really clued in on just how different she is in the opening sequences of this movie.
That's a really good point. Yeah, because you can see that the fear has kind of transformed her over time. She no longer, no longer smiles at all. She's just kind of hollowed out by this fear for her son, and yeah, I mean the scenes where she's with Commodus and she's like paralyzed with fear, but also trying really hard to just behave normal. It's a great. There's I don't know, man. You just pick off every actor in this movie and talk about how great they are. Basically, I mean,
you really could, yeah.
Is it Richard Harris? No, it's is it Richard?
Richard Harris is Marcus Aurelius, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's like a minor role, but really starts the movie off strong, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, just the last thing that I would want to hit on this movie would be the music and how. I mean, just objectively incredible. Like one of my favorite soundtracks, maybe my favorite soundtrack actually, of any movie. And then and then everybody just copied it for. I was going to say for the next 10 years, but the fact is, people are still copying it now. So
some people copied it stylistically, and some people just literally stole the music. Of course, we mentioned this on Pirates of the Caribbean, but I'm going to say it here again that. It's the same. It's the exact same. I mean, there's two very distinct motifs in this movie, right? One's like the sad one, and then one's like the middle of action sequence one. And it's the middle of action sequence one that Pirates of the Caribbean just lifted whole cloth. like it's the same thing.
That's true. But then as for the sad one, all sorts of places lift, as you said, either basically a ripoff of the melody, or at the very least just stealing the idea of the female vocalist thing, which is now so prevalent that you almost wouldn't believe, like, no, this definitely all started with Gladiator, 100%.
Yeah.
So.
But I mean, and the reason for that is because it is so remarkably effective. Like it just really is. I mean, that's a really good point, because Lord of the Rings comes out after this, right? And Lord of the Rings, I don't know if Lord of the Rings would sound the way it sounds without this movie coming before it.
It's a good question. I definitely think there's some influence, yeah.
It is very possible that Lord of the Rings came out in 2001, right? So it is very possible that like while they were putting the finishing touches on designing the sound of that movie, they went and watched Gladiator. And I definitely think like the Fellowship of the Ring is a certain thing. I think the Two Towers is like the most clear example of the Gladiator influence on Hollywood, because I know they shot these movies in succession, but at the same time, but still like, there was lag between and they were watching other movies and stuff. Like that is a movie that feels like it lives in a post Gladiator world, because there's much more war going on in that movie. It's just that movie.
Right.
Like,
well, I mean, you can just look at the sequence in Helm's Deep where it transitions from battle and fun and joking about how fun the battle is to how they're getting killed. And then suddenly we transition into female voice crooning music.
Yeah, yeah,
slow
definitely.
motion. Yeah, total Gladiator influence right there. I agree.
And to be fair to good old Mel Gibson, I do think Braveheart owns part of this, certainly. Braveheart was definitely one of the first movies that did this big epic battle with extreme violence thing. But yeah, to your point, Gladiator it shoots it much better. Who knew that Ridley Scott is a better director than Mel Gibson? Who knew?
Yeah, right. I know. I enjoy Braveheart.
I do too.
It's a nice. It's what it is. But just like this movie, it's just perfect.
Braveheart was one of my first experiences with the concept of a character losing their loved one, because I was 11, and I think the moment where his wife gets her, spoilers for Braveheart, his wife gets her throat slit. I think 11-year-old Scott was like, "What?
Can't do that.
It's the good guy's wife. You can't do." No,
Yeah.
that really fucked me up, and so I will always have a special place in my heart for that movie. But yes, this took that and elevated it and escalated it, and like Saving Private Ryan was like the text for the modern war film. I think Gladiator is definitely that for the modern the telling of historical war films, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
So good. What a movie. So here's how I want to finish this with you, though. I want you to come on a journey with me, Matt. This is we're gonna go out there, because we talked a lot about this movie, but I want to end by bringing it back to Sir Ridley Scott himself. Is there a world in which you could see this movie as a metaphor for Ridley Scott's entire career, right? The fickle nature of the audience, right? Because I mean, I never thought about this, because this is one of those things that watching these movies in this order can do for us. Because, he comes out, bam, he has Alien. Everyone loves him. He's the new big director. And then what happens after that? Blade Runner, cult classic, didn't do very well. Legend didn't do very well. Someone to Watch Over Me, nobody saw it. Black Rain did really good because someone made a movie about Japan, and a lot of Japanese people saw it. Thelma and Louise, very well regarded movie, but a small movie. 1492, disaster. White Squall, not great. G.I. Jane, not great. And a man who by the year 2002 or 2000, been working for 22 years, and not really had even close to the success he had at the first of it. You can just imagine him working and standing in the middle of his arena, aka his set, going, "Are you not entertained? What is it? What is it that I need to do to entertain you folks? What is it that you want?" And there's a part of me that says, "Oh, you just want me to fuck some people up." And that's what you fucking savages want, is you just want me to murder a bunch of people on screen. So fine, here you go. I'm going to murder a bunch of people on screen, and then I'm going to work my ass off to make you feel fucking miserable about it. Because I'm Ridley Scott and I'm pissed off at all of you.
I mean, it's funny. I think the secret behind the box office is definitely Brutal Decapitations. If we look at all of his top box office movies, Alien, Someone to What? Black Rain.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Gladiator, and 1492. All films that feature brutal decapitations. Every other film is below the line. No decapitations.
1492 was definitely below the line, Matt.
Oh wait, sorry, I was looking at the wrong column. 1492 has decapitations, but they occur off screen, which is important.
Ah, there you go.
We only see decapitated heads, and that's not that. Nobody wants to see that. That's just gross. We want to see the blade severing the flesh. That's what we want.
Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, what I'm trying to argue here is that there was absolutely, in my mind, a point in the 12 months that Ridley Scott was working on this movie where he thought of himself as Caesar, desperate to get these people to love him and unsure of how to do it anymore.
And then do you think maybe he then thought, no, I will not succumb. I will maintain my integrity like Maximus. Yeah. I will make the movie that I want to make the way I want to make it. And if they don't like it, they can shove it. and then he made Gladiator, and then everybody did love him because
Yeah, I mean, I think he was wrestling with am I Caesar, or am I Commodus, or am I Maximus? Who am I? And I think he embraced his inner Maximus and created this movie. And like we've talked about, will proceed to go on a run here. You know, he has from here, 2001 we get Hannibal, we get Black Hawk Down, then we get Matchstick Men in 2003, we get Kingdom of Heaven 2005, a movie I am interested to talk to you about. Kingdom of Heaven, that might be one of the first ones where we have to actually like intentionally watch the director's cut of that movie.
Yeah,
because that movie was completely ripped out of his hands and ripped apart.
Yeah, and I've never seen the director's cut. I've only ever seen the theatrical cut, and I've heard that the director's cut is just this masterpiece, and so I want to watch the director's cut specifically.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, from here on out, he goes on a run, and obviously, you know, he hasn't had the same financial success that he had on this movie, on everything that comes after this, but his career, Gladiator, I think, saves his career. I think if this movie had bombed, does Ridley Scott get any more money to make any more movies?
Well, I you know, maybe not, but I think one thing that we've kind of learned is that he was sort of clever in making his own production company, where I think he kind of somehow largely funds himself. Actually, we should look into this, because at this point I'm really confused and curious, because the budget the budget for Gladiator was over $100 million.
Yeah, who gave Ridley Scott $100 million?
Right.
That's you're absolutely right. This is an important question. I think we need to get to the bottom of this. I do believe Gladiator was at least produced by Scott Free. I don't, but also DreamWorks and Universal. So presumably those two companies put up quite a bit of the bank. I just don't think Ridley Scott has $100 million he can toss toward a project, you know, maybe he does today, but I don't think he did in 1999 or anything. So yeah, this is the remarkable thing about this man's career, is he can have failure after failure after failure, you know, box office wise, and yet he's still able to finance movies. Like, people are still willing to give him, because like $100 million sounds small in 2022, where most big blockbuster movies cost upwards of 250. But in the year 2000, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he was just able to raise money on the strength of the script, because I mean, you can imagine people seeing this and thinking, okay, I can see how this could be awesome, actually.
Yeah. I mean, there are people who get locked in director's jail for something like 1492 and never get out. Like, that movie cost $50 million to make and made $7 million. You lost a lot of people some big chunks of change on that one.
Yeah.
And yet he continued to make movies, and I mean, it's remarkable. I'm glad it happened. Right. I'm like, imagine a world in which this movie doesn't get financed. That's sad.
Yeah.
Or another director does it. I mean, that's a fun thing to think about, you know, is how different this movie would have been if someone else had directed it. I think hugely.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that keeps coming up in these conversations is the businessman can't be extricated from the artist here. Like, it's a really, really weird and unique combination, because it's like Ridley can't help himself from making these like extremely artistic, visually arresting movies, and yet at the same time he's obviously a very savvy business guy. Otherwise they wouldn't keep giving him money, or he wouldn't. We'll look into this. We need to figure this out.
We do. So that will be our goal between now and our next episode, which will be covering the 2001 film Hannibal. We will not be doing that next week, though. Next week is going to be our monthly Doof Canon episode. So we'll come back in 2 weeks' time to cover Hannibal. So that gives us enough time to do some research, Matt.
All right.
So that is it for Gladiator. I'm happy with the way that conversation went, Matt. I knew this is a hugely important movie to you, so I wanted to make sure we did it justice, and I think we did.
Yeah, I feel like we figured some stuff out and hashed some stuff out that has probably been confusing me for 25 years or so. Something.
Doof. Okay, Matt, I want to talk to you about Nathan Fielder. Do
Okay.
you know who Nathan Fielder is?
Not kind of. I know that he is. See, that's funny. I was going to say a comedian, and then I'm like, well, is he a comedian? So
Yes.
almost. I think I just want to say, not really. I kind of know that he did a popular show that I also didn't see. So I know very little about Nathan Fielder.
Yeah. So Nathan Fielder is a comedian. He is. He created a show for Comedy Central called Nathan for You. The basic concept of the show was he was going to find real life businesses that were struggling to make it and give them ideas for how they can improve their business. And the ideas were all stupid and bad. And Nathan Fielder plays this like kind of awkward antisocial character who really can't talk to people, but he tries to help them. A good example of a classic Nathan for You episode is there was a realtor who was struggling to get herself noticed in a very heavily contested real estate market. And so he decided to help her by having her market herself as the only realtor who guarantees that all the houses she sells are ghost free. And this is a real person, by the way, a real realtor. And so every house she was going to put on the market, they would have someone come in and detect whether there were spirits or there or not. And while this whole thing is happening, she like randomly says, this reminds me of an experience I had where I was possessed by a ghost. And, and you can see the absolute joy on his face as he's trying to stay in character of like, he was not expecting this at all. And like, he's like, yes. But this is the kind of thing he does, right? He takes real people and like through his kind of brand of awkward, cringe, not exactly cringe, but definitely awkward, socially awkward humor, makes art, hilarious art.
Yeah. So can I just briefly ask, like, I sometimes struggle with cringe humor. Is this something that is going to bother me, or do you think I'll be okay?
So it's difficult for me to say that because cringe humor doesn't bother me that much, but I don't know if I would call it cringe in that way. I think it's mostly just he's very awkward and self-deprecating. And so it's not exactly like, oh, that's so cringe. It's just like watching real people react to this guy is really fascinating and hilarious.
Okay. All right.
So this new show he has that came out last week on HBO Max is called The Rehearsal. And the basic concept of the show is this. I, Nathan Fielder, am a very awkward person. And so when I get into social situations, the way I deal with that is I build full-scale replicas of the room that I'm going to be having that social situation in. And then I rehearse it hundreds of times until I know exactly what to say in every situation. And I will help people by doing that same thing for them. So the first episode, he meets a guy who is part of a very competitive like bar trivia group, and he has told everyone on his team that he has a master's degree, and that is a lie. And he's really worried that they're going to hate him when he tells them that he doesn't actually have a master's degree, because there's one person on the team that is like continually trying to help him find new work and is sending him jobs that he could only get if he has a master's. It's the kind of situation where on the surface you just go, dude, just tell them, they're not going to care. But Nathan goes, okay, let's there's one girl on the team that he's most nervous about telling this to. So we're going to hire an actress to play her. We're going to build the bar to the exact replica, and we're going to rehearse you telling her this thing over and over and over again. He builds like a complex like tree of options and choices, and just watching this thing play out at this guy who's a little awkward himself is just some of the funniest things I've ever seen. Like I'm not doing a great job explaining it, I don't think, because it's such a complicated concept, but then you watch it and it all kind of clicks.
Okay.
And you know exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, it sounds utterly bizarre to me.
It's insane. It's absolutely insane.
Yeah. That I really appreciate people doing weird things, so that counts for a lot of points.
Yeah. So at one point, he needs to know, in order to get the woman that he wants to confess to, in order to have an actress who plays her properly. He has the actress that he's hired to be her pose as someone who wants to interview her. And so they go to a park and do an interview and talk forever. And then the next time you see the actress, she's doing like a pitch perfect impression of this woman. And it's just like, it's so funny the places it goes. Like, I don't want to spoil the whole episode, but there's a one part where the guy gets really invested. Like he's trying to work through and practice revealing the secret, but like to make it real, they also have bar trivia going on in the background. And he starts getting like really invested in getting the questions right, even though it's fake for the rehearsal. and all that leads to a point where he's like, if I'm losing at bar trivia, I'm not going to confess, because I'm not going to ruin her day twice by losing a bar trivia and telling her this truth about me. So Nathan's response to that is he can't help him cheat because the guy refuses to cheat. So instead, he gets the questions. He knows what the questions are going to be. And then he hires actors to be along their walk in the morning and say random pieces of facts out loud that are the answers to the questions. So they'll be walking by like a construction guy, and he'll say to the construction guy, "Man, that's a really tall building." And the guy will be like, "Yep, sure is, but not as tall as the tallest building in the world. That's the Burj Khalifa." "Yep, the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world."
Oh my God.
And it's just like the extent at which, like, I think that it takes the concept, right, and it just keeps ramping and ramping and ramping and escalating, and it's just so fucking funny. And then I think another interesting thing he does, and this is, I'll stop talking after this. I'll finish on. He also makes it like weirdly heartfelt. Like one of the most well-known episodes of Nathan For You is the series finale, which is called Finding Francis, in which it's a show, an episode where he's trying to help. He starts off like doing his business stuff, and then he finds out that one of the actors he hires to do part of his business stuff has this long lost love that he hasn't seen in 20 years. And so he says, "I'm going to help you find her, and you're going to be reunited with her." And it ends up being this incredibly like beautiful like examination of loneliness and life, and just the choices we make and the people we surround ourselves with and how we combat those things. It's actually like beautiful on top of being fucking hilarious. And that's one of the things that this show ends up doing too, because it's also it's not just, I've seen a lot of takes online that don't like Nathan Fielder and don't like the show because it feels like it's being mean and making fun of this real life person. And I really don't think it is. I think what it's doing more than anything is making fun of Nathan Fielder. And it really skirts the line of how much of this is Nathan being self-deprecating for the bit, and how much of this is him actually revealing his inner insecurities and issues that he's dealing with. And you kind of leave the show and you're like, I don't actually know the answer to that question. And it makes it all the more fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, not even having watched it, I find myself very curious about this human being. Like, kind of in the way that you get really curious about Sacha Baron Cohen, where you're like, what the hell is this person actually like that they can commit themselves to something as weird as this adventure, you know?
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's on HBO Max. There's one episode out. I think by the time people are listening to this, a second episode will be out. I haven't seen it, but I'll say if you liked Nathan For You, you're gonna love this show, and I would recommend it. Everyone at least try it. And I don't know if you end up watching it, Matt. Let me know about the cringe stuff, because I'm not a good detector of that, because that's not something that's ever bothered me really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say like I did watch like almost the entirety of The Office, so clearly it doesn't bother me that much.
Sure. Yeah, everyone uses that. Which episode of The Office is it? The one where he has to tell the kids that he doesn't actually have any money for their scholarships or something like that.
Yeah,
it's like the most cringy episode of it. Yeah. I love that. I thought that was hilarious. So I'm a bad judge of this thing. So
yeah, well,
but
wonderful
show.
I'd like to check it out. I'll put it on my long list.
Yeah, definitely. Everyone should. beautiful, hilarious, and God, Nathan Fielder, just keep making stuff, Nathan, please. He's so good.
Yeah.
I was last thing, I promise. People have been talking about Nathan Fielder a lot online, and part of what they're talking about is like sharing old clips of him. And I saw one today that I think encapsulates exactly who he is, that I had never seen before, because I think it was on something he did before Nathan For You. But he's like interviewing like a Radio Shack employee or the equivalent employee about MP3 players.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, all right, well, let's do a role play where I come in the store and you sell me an MP3 player, and we can kind of figure out what they are by this interaction. And so he sets that up, and then of course the thing he does is he plays the person in the store as a person who doesn't want an MP3 player and just wants to browse. And so there's just this like really awkward moment where he's like, no, thanks, I just want to look around. And then the guy is just like, okay. And then there's just like 10 seconds of silence where you know the person is like, what the fuck he set this, this is an interview, what is going on? But he won't say anything about it. I think part of it is like really pushing people to see how far they'll tolerate something before they like say something about it. Cause like no one wants to be the guy that says, hey man, what the fuck's going on here? Right. They just kind of want to roll with it. And I think Nathan Fielder abuses that tendency of people a lot to mine some really funny situations.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good Rosetta Stone right there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I am done now. Everyone check out The Rehearsal on HBO Max.
All right.
And that is it for this week. If you have any opinions on Ridley Scott, on Gladiator, or on Nathan Fielder's The Rehearsal, feel free to reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, or on Twitter at doofmedia, or over on our Reddit account. That's r/doofmedia. Reach out to us. Let us know. I want to hear if other people are watching The Rehearsal. I want to hear what you're thinking of it. And Matt, I think we should let people know that on our other podcast, Kingslingers, we did a big thing today, right? What did we do?
We did. We released our first episode covering Stephen King's The Stand, one of his most beloved books.
Yeah.
And, if you want to read along with us, you can absolutely pick up a copy of The Stand and start. We did the first, I want to say 10 or so chapters. First 9 chapters.
You were close.
First 9 chapters. And yeah, we're gonna be covering that book for quite a while because it's a pretty thick one.
Yeah, so maybe you've never listened to Kingslingers because you've never read The Dark Tower and haven't been interested in it, but a lot of people have read The Stand. I think more people than have read The Dark Tower for sure. So if you aren't really into Dark Tower but are into The Stand, join us. Please join us.
Yeah,
it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be great. I that first episode I had so much fun, and I'm already reading the pages for next week, and oh boy, Matt. Oh boy.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find us on all the main podcasting platforms, YouTube, pretty much wherever you look.
That is right. And if you like what we do here and want to support us, you can head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and donate at any of the available levels. There's tons of bonus features. One of the big bonus features for all patrons is ability to vote on which movie we're going to do on the Doof Canon, which is happening right here next week. So right now on Patreon, there is a vote going on for which movie we're going to cover next week to see if it gets into the canon. At this moment, the movie that is winning is the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is a movie that came out just this year. So if you want to have your say in what movie we're going to be covering next week, head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia and join the community and then vote for what movie you want.
That's right. Also, please consider rating and reviewing the Doofcast on Apple Podcasts, because that does help us to get more exposure and introduces new people to the stuff we're doing here.
All right, folks, we will see you all next week for a new movie. We don't know quite what it is yet. It's looking like it's going to be Everything Everywhere All at Once, but it could be something else. But just be here and join us and talk about some movies. We'll see you next week.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.